Let's talk about budgeting. Now, you're probably budgeting because you want to make sure you can pay your bills on time and maybe have a few bucks left over, save for your future, right? Well, let me tell you something. That kind of budgeting is for losers. Now, am I saying that you're a loser because you're budgeting? Of course not. What I am saying is if that's the reason you're budgeting, then you're probably losing a ton of cash every month, and you've probably already lost a small fortune, and you don't even know it. Now, come with me inside the studio, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. Let's talk about budgeting. You probably think it's mainly for the purpose of making sure you're paying your bills on time and, maybe so you can put some extra cash away for the future. Yeah, that's what most people think. You know the drill. You sit down with a list of bills and a calculator, pen, paper, whatever, and you start budgeting. What you're hoping to do is simple. You're trying to make sure that you can pay all of your bills and hopefully have some decent cash left over so you can have a life and maybe save for your future too. But there are 3 cash flow secrets you need to know when it comes to budgeting effectively. Because if you don't know them, you could be losing as much as $1,000 or more each month right now. And you've probably already lost a small fortune. The first cash flow secret is to redirect your focus. Now, here's what I mean by that. When it comes to budgeting, like everybody else, you focus on making sure you're able to pay your bills. You get that stack of bills out and you add them all up. And you hope you're bringing home more than you're on the hook for every month. If you do, you feel pretty good. If you don't, you play with the numbers and try to trim some financial fat so you can feel better about the numbers that you're looking at. And the number you're focused on the most is the number on the bottom, how much you have left over. You're focused on making sure that number is as big as possible. Now, let's take a look at an example. This is the budget from the Fortunato family. They're the sample family from my book, The Debt-Free Millionaire. Their budget looks like this. They bring home $4,600 a month after taxes, and to feed themselves and their 2 kids, put gas in the car, keep their new iPhone and their Samsung smartphones, pay the insurance, cable, property taxes, internet, utilities, you get the picture, everything costs them about $1,600 a month. They've got a house payment, a couple car payments, and a handful of credit cards. And when all is said and done, they have $425 left over. And they feel, hey, this is pretty good, right? They think their job is done. I mean, how would you feel if, after you've paid everything that you have to pay every month and you had over $400 left over? Let me know in the comments if you're budgeting, and if you focus on making that bottom number as big as it can be, if that's what you're really trying to accomplish when you budget. I'm here to tell you that that good feeling you have if you've paid all your bills and you've got a decent chunk of change left over, that feeling is where you begin to lose a ton of cash. We'll get to that a little bit more in cash flow secret number 3. But first, instead of focusing on that bottom number, what's left over, and trying to make that number as big as possible, there is another number on your budgeting page that's more important than any other number. And that's the number at the top, your income. You need to redirect your focus on that number and not the number on the bottom, what's left over. And that leads me to cash flow secret number 2. Cash flow secret number 2 has to do with the purpose budgeting places on that top number, your income. That purpose right now is to just pay your bills and try to have as much as you can left over as possible. However, applying this kind of purpose to your income is what's costing you a ton of money every month. That's why cash flow secret number 2 is to redirect the purpose for your income. Instead of using the income from your work to just pay your bills, which is what typical budgeting strategies focus on, let me provide you with a new, more powerful use for your income. Are you ready? You need to use the income from your work to replace the income from your work. The reason you need to focus on using the income from your work, your job or your career, to replace the income from your work is simple. Someday, you're going to want to quit working. And the only way you can quit working is if you no longer need the income from the work that you're doing, right? I mean, doesn't it just make sense? And can you see the difference between these 2 purposes? Let me know in the comments if you can see how using the income from your work to replace the income from your work sounds a lot better than using your income to just pay your bills. Now, according to the National Institute on Retirement Security, 92% of all working Americans will never be able to quit working and still maintain a comfortable lifestyle. That means only 8% can retire comfortably after they quit working. Now, do you think you're an 8%er or a 92%er? Now, I believe the reason 92% will never be able to quit working is because traditional budgeting strategies have failed miserably. Just stop and think about how much money you've already made during your working lifetime. It's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you probably have little to show for it. That's because you focused on using your income from your work to pay bills instead of using your income from your work to replace the income from your work. And that's cost you a ton of cash. But I can hear you thinking, how do I use my income from my work to replace the income from my work? It's a great question, and that's what our next cash flow secret is all about. Cash flow secret number 3 is to redirect your cash flow. Typically when you look at your budget, you have that number at the top, your income, and then the number at the bottom, what you have left over from your income after you've paid all of your bills. What's happening between those two numbers, that's your life. And you're obviously focused on building as good a life as you can for yourself. That just makes sense because you deserve it. But what's going on in between those two numbers is having a tremendously negative impact on that life you know you deserve. And it starts with where the majority of your cash is flowing. Let's take another look at the Fortunato budget and do a quick analysis on where their cash flow is going every month. Whatever your numbers are, follow along here with how we're going to look at the Fortunato numbers, okay? And you'll get the idea. Now, their income is the $4,600 a month that they have left over after their taxes are deducted. That's the number they need to focus on, cash flow secret number 1. And the number they have to replace, which is cash flow secret number 2. Their living expenses, where they're paying for everything in their life each month. That's $1,600 a month. Now, you can only trim so much financial fat from there because, let's face it, you got to live, right? The only category of expenses that's left over is their debt payments, their mortgage, their cars, and their credit cards. Right now, they have $2,575 of their hard-earned cash flowing out each month in the debt direction. That's 55.9% of their net monthly income. And that amount of cash flow is what needs to be redirected. To understand how to redirect your cash flow and get properly motivated, though, we have to first break these numbers down. When the Fortunatos signed on the dotted line for their mortgage, their 2 cars, and their credit cards, they agreed to specific interest rates for each, probably like you did. Their mortgage was 6.79%, their cars 8% for each car. Their credit cards vary between 14 and 19.5%. Now the question is, what amount of interest are these debts costing them each month? How much of the $2,575 in total monthly debt payments is being applied to interest, and how much is being applied to principal? And just to clarify, the principal is what's applied to the balance of what they owe on each account, and the interest is the profit to the companies that they're paying. To figure this out, I created a handy little spreadsheet. If you'd like a copy, you can download it using the link below. And I think you're going to want to have a copy of it when you see how these numbers work. Okay, for the Fortunatos, of the $2,575 in total payments they made this month, $1,487.37 was applied to interest, profit to their lenders, and only $1,087.63 was applied to the balances they owe. That's 57.76% of their total payments applied to interest. Doesn't that sound like a lot more than the interest rates they thought they were paying? What about you and the interest rates you think you're paying? I know, you're wondering, how the heck is this even possible? So let's pull back the curtain on the payments. The interest rates for their mortgage and their cars, which, the 6.79% and 8%, that's the interest they would have paid if they paid off the entire balance in the first year. Who the heck is able to do that, right? So the balances they owe, interest rates they're charged, and their payments are all based on something called an amortization schedule. These schedules very heavily load the earlier payments with interest, and mortgages are notorious for charging excessive interest on the payments in the early years. Just look at this table. What you're looking at is a table that calculates how much of your payment is applied towards interest over the first 7 years of a mortgage. Remember those 3% mortgages everybody was so excited about? Check this out. Over the first 7 years of a 3% mortgage, 54.88% of all of those payments is applied to interest alone. What that means is if you had a 3% mortgage and your monthly payment is $1,000, over 7 years you make 84 payments. That's $84,000 in total mortgage payments, and $46,099.20 would have been interest, would have been profit to your mortgage lender. That's almost 55% of every payment you made during the first 7 years. Doesn't that sound like a heck of a lot more than 3%? Now, maybe you didn't qualify for the 3% mortgage, but you nailed down a 6% mortgage. Then over the first 7 years, 79.43% of every dollar you paid for the first 7 years was lost to interest alone. And when it comes to credit cards, those interest rates are calculated differently because, credit cards have revolving interest because your balance can change from month to month. So your payment is calculated on the annual interest rate and the balance owed at the time you make the payment. But for every dollar you send to your credit card company, anywhere between 30 and 48 cents, that's 30 and 48% is interest. The spreadsheet you can download below has all the formulas built in, so all you've got to do is fill in the blanks and you can see how much interest you're really paying. Let me ask you a question. How does all this make you feel? I hope it's making you feel a little upset because, getting a little angry about how much money you're losing every month will help properly motivate you to do some serious cash flow redirecting, right? And when it comes to cash flow secret number 3, redirecting your cash flow, what your goal will be is to redirect the flow of cash you're losing to principal and interest payments on your debt right now every month. For the Fortunatos, that's at $2,575 they have flowing out to payments every month. And of that amount, over 50% is lost to interest. Now, remember when I said budgets are for losers? I think you now know why I said that, right? Now, instead of having all that cash flowing out to debt payments where you're losing a ton of money to interest, what you want to do is redirect that cash flow back to you. And when you do that, that's how you begin to use the income from your work to replace the income from your work. And the first step to doing that has to do with what you do with one of the numbers we talked about earlier, the number on the bottom of the page. This amount, which for the Fortunatos was the $425, that's what's left over from their income after they've paid all their bills. So that's the amount of income they have to work with. How much do you have to work with? You see, what you do is you take whatever that amount is that you have and you add it to the payment for the smallest debt. And then you make that one bigger payment on that smallest debt and it pays it off really quick. And then when you have that debt paid off, you take whatever that total amount is from the Fortunatos, it was the $425. You add all of that money and you keep snowballing it until that next debt is paid off. And then you snowball it on top of the next debt and next debt. You just keep rinsing and repeating until all of your debt is paid off. This is called the Snowball Method. And this is how you use the income from your work to replace the income from your work. Because when all your debt is paid off, you've just recovered all that money you were losing to interest as well as what you were paying towards principal. For the Fortunatos, it's $2,575 a month. When you add that recovered cash flow to the $425 they had from the beginning, that's $3,000 a month in cash flow they can now redirect to themselves in a good solid savings plan. With all that liberated cash flow, they can begin to start a savings plan for their future and build a real life for themselves instead of making their creditors rich. Now that's powerful. But believe it or not, there's an even more powerful way to apply the Snowball Method. Instead of snowballing all that money to your creditors, you could be snowballing all that money into a special account that does two things at the same time. Number one, pay off your debt. Number two, simultaneously build you some tax-free wealth. Now, this is important because on average, it can take anywhere between 5 to 8 years to pay off all of your debt when you snowball that payment total to all of your creditors. That time frame will obviously depend on what your numbers are, and that's 5 to 8 years. You're not saving for your future. These accounts allow you to do both, pay off your debt and build tax-free wealth simultaneously with the same dollars. That takes the power of the Snowball Method to another level. If you want more information on how these types of accounts work, just click the link below. And while you're at it, let me know if these 3 cash flow secrets helped you. If they did, then you should subscribe to our channel so you can be notified when more videos like these are posted. And finally, if there's a personal finance topic you'd like to know more about, suggest it in the comments. I'm always checking to see how I can help you end up with more money. After all, you're the one who's earning it, right? Thanks for watching, and if you have any personal financial topics you'd like to know more about, just let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time.